Good evening. Welcome to tonight's DAZZLE Unlimited. I'm Steve Steinberg, and again, I'm pleased you're here with us tonight. I'm recording this particular show on location in Stockholm, Sweden. Right now, the date is August 22nd, 2008. It's a nice time here. And I'm at the tail end right now of a major week-long convention that's been taking place here on the topic of water. But actually, it's more than just water. It's the whole issue, the involved issues, I should say, of climate change, food supply, sanitation, survivability of the human race, basically, is what it all is part of on a global basis. Very key issues that I think should be something that we should all be aware of, and that's why I'm doing this show and others of this nature from here. Let me introduce to you tonight's special guest. Welcome to the show, and if I get your name pronounced incorrectly, please correct me. My special guest is Professor Szöllösi-Nagy, Dr. Szöllösi-Nagy, and you are the Deputy Assistant Director General for Natural Science at the Secretary of the International Hydrological Program, and the Director.
Yeah, I know. 3 jobs, 1 salary. I would prefer the other way around.
Okay. But Director of Division of Water Sciences at the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization.
UNESCO.
UNESCO. Why didn't I just say UNESCO?
Exactly.
Anyway, thank you for joining us on the show this evening. And you have an expertise in so many areas related to what I was introducing the topic of the show as being. And you, through UNESCO, have a hand in dealing with governments and organizations in a wide variety of countries and their views on these issues about climate, water, food supply, etc. So I painted an extremely broad picture. I'm talking about the planet Earth. Where would you say is the most, or what would you say is the most critically important issue on a global basis in terms of climate, water supply, food supply, etc., that you would like to start our discussion with?
I think the most important thing is to look at the impacts of climate change, and particularly the adaptation strategies, but not only climate change, the impacts and adaptation strategies to global changes, because there are other drivers that are changing how water is being distributed in space and time on the Earth. And perhaps the most important thing is population change.
Population change.
In the coming few decades, the current population will be increased by nearly 50%. So there will be 9 billion human beings on the Earth.
By?
This is by 2050, 2060. And that is right around the corner. That will induce tremendous other changes, which contribute to the water changes, but also will contribute to climate change, such as land use changes that will change the runoff conditions, such as migration from rural to urban areas. The whole process of urbanization today, half of humanity already lives in cities.
Half of the global population?
Yes.
In cities?
More than 50%.
Oh.
We just last October or so we have passed that particular critical limit. And if it goes like this, and very likely it will, then in 20 years' time, 60% of the human population will live in urban areas, which will pose extremely serious problems, not only for water, but social and related things. So if one looks at how water will be managed in 50 years from now, very likely the most important change will be caused by the population increase and derived drivers
Which means a greater concentration of population in limited geographic areas.
And a higher number, by 3 billion. So the current population 6 plus 3.
Right.
That's a huge number. New customers, if you wish, who has to be supplied with healthy, adequate drinking water.
And a way to get rid of what is currently called waste products in a safe way, and maybe recycle it all. I mean,
interestingly enough, this conference was perhaps the first one which has adopted a very important recommendation to look at this waste as a source, as a resource, not as something that is negative and has to be eliminated, but something that could be used through recycling, through reuse, agricultural fertilization, and other purposes to produce positive effects. But going back to these big drivers, climate change and climate variability is extremely important. Climate change is not a new phenomenon. It has always happened. For instance, the current Sahara 10,000 years ago was a very, very fertile land, jungle, basically. And under the Sahara today, we have one of the largest freshwater body on the earth, the so-called Nubian sandstone aquifer that has been recharged during the Holocene climate optimum. That was a climate change, and then the whole desertification process took over. Civilization was flourishing in the current Sahara. You can see that in the Tassili Mountains, the drawings which you find in the caves, and also the so-called rock art. So people 10,000 years ago had a flourishing civilization there. But because of the shifts in the climate, and that was a natural climate.
I was going to say, it's had to be natural. Absolutely. What else could it have been?
Absolutely. And this is one of our problems now, is that we are still not able to split up this climate change signal into two. What is it what is due to the natural change, and which part is due to the human influence ever since the Industrial Revolution?
But there are studies. We have many people saying there's global warming, it's underway, and it's because of human activity. And of course that's controversial. So how would you fold that into the equation and make some statistical or qualitative decisions about that?
Well, there's no doubt about it. It's measured. It's an established fact. And particularly, I'm a hydrologist by my training, so I will take my examples from hydrology. Particularly in some of the hydrological processes, you can already measure that, namely in the solid phase of water, glaciers and snow. There's evidence to show how these glaciers are going back and how they are losing their volume, how the permafrost is changing, how the permanent snow cover is getting reduced. On the other hand, if you look at the flow records, we don't have yet the signals of climate change. In some parts of the world, flows go up, there are more floods. In some parts of the world, flows go down.
It flows, water flows, rivers, etc.
Rivers, that's right. There's the runoff, as we call it. In some other areas, the flows go down, but there's no general tendency. There are local changes that could be observed. The hypothesis, what the scientific community is now testing, is whether the water cycle is accelerating, the hydrological cycle. Very simply, perhaps oversimplified, this is what happens. There's more water trapped in the atmosphere because of the greenhouse gas effect. So it's warming up. If it's warming up, there is more evaporation and transpiration from the plants. If there is more evapotranspiration, there's more water vapor going up. There is more water vapor, there's a higher probability that clouds will be formed. If there are more clouds, there's a higher probability that rainfall will precipitate out from the clouds. And there's higher rainfall, there is higher runoff. Therefore, what the hypothesis is that indeed, can we establish scientifically that the cycle is accelerating, which means that in unit time, the cycle is moving faster. If it moves faster, that in the two extremes, there will be more events occurring. There will be more floods, more frequently, and with an increased magnitude. Likewise, in order to keep the balance, because we have the amount of water today the same as 10,000 years ago, or 5,000 years ago, or 1,000,000 years ago.
Yes, it doesn't change.
But the time distribution is changing and the space distribution. So in order to balance the extreme, on the flood side, there will be very likely more droughts and in an extended area.
But flooding in one area, droughts in another, because you can't have.
Exactly, absolutely. That's right. For instance, in areas like China, early model simulation shows that in the Yellow River, the drought conditions will be even worse than today. So it becomes really an arid zone. 1,000 kilometers down below the Yangtze River, the floods will increase and the flood frequencies will likely increase. And it's all over the place. The thing is that subjectively, it is felt that there are more floods, there are more disasters that are occurring. So what we are trying to do is to sharpen our statistical tools in order to really make statistically significant statements that yes, the climate change is already observable in the hydrological variables, and yes, we have more floods occurring. And yes, we have to start now developing adaptation strategies. This is the big question. You can't stop climate change. This is too huge.
Well, even in Antarctica, the Ross ice shelf, was it a couple of years ago, just sloughed off,
absolutely,
floated away.
So these are the
it's like 40 kilometers long.
Absolutely. You cannot stop these things happen. So the question is, what's the best adaptation strategy for humanity?
More in a moment. I'll be back with my special guest on tonight's Dazzle Unlimited right after this break. Stay tuned. This is Steve Steinberg speaking. If you have comments, suggestions, or would like to advertise on Dazzle Unlimited, contact us at dazzle@dazzleunlimited.com. The Dazzle Unlimited series airs Wednesday evenings, 8:30 p.m. on Time Warner Cable of New York City, Channel 35, Southern Manhattan. And now, please stay tuned. There's more to come on tonight's Dazzle Unlimited.
Explore new worlds. Read. Visit literacy.gov and let the journey begin.
What are the adaptation strategies? What can we do? Obviously, to mitigate the extremes and the randomness of the extremes is the same thing when you don't have food. What do? You store. So we need more storage space for water, very likely. We have to go more to the use of renewable energies. So if you have more reservoirs, then you may as well have more hydropower, because all you have to do is to fix a turbine to that. And hydropower is not only an adaptation strategy, but it's a mitigation strategy, because it does not release carbon dioxide, or very minimum, through evaporation to the environment, to the atmosphere.
What we've just been describing has to do with conservation of water systems and the more effective use of those conserved water systems to produce, consequently, more energy, hydroelectric-based, at least, energy. But if you expand from this idea into the whole issue of what humans generally need in order to survive, certainly we need energy, but we need water nutritionally. Can you extrapolate from what you were describing in that system and bring it over to the human survival issue?
Well, we will not be running out of water. I mean, there is a hypothesis that the Earth's carrying capacity is somewhere around 9 billion or 10 billion human beings. And then you can really see in the population statistics that it grows, and now it starts leveling off. So indeed, the population statistics are fairly precise. And there's plenty of water to supply 10 billion human beings with.
But it's a question of access and purity.
It's a question of access and a question of where. Now, you have to recognize that 90%, nearly 90% of the unfrozen water is under the ground.
Under the ground, on aquifers.
And aquifers. So the huge strategical response lies in the management of the aquifers and a more intensive use of groundwater resources. They are more robust in terms of quantity, but more vulnerable in terms of quality. So this should be a policy issue for the governments, how to preserve, if not improve, the quality of major aquifers. Aquifers provide a tremendous source of water, including some of the fossil aquifers, such as the one I was referring to under the Sahara. And that is a very important adaptation measure next to reservoirs. They could be surface reservoirs or underground reservoirs next to hydropower. But there's a fourth one, which is a forgotten option, and that's inland navigation.
Inland navigation?
Yeah. If you look at what made the United States a very powerful nation economically, it's the 19th century, 20th century, mid-20th century infrastructure investment into water, into inland navigation, into reservoirs. The United States has now, 80,000 reservoirs? Huge amount.
80,000.
And that's the backbone of the economy in many regards.
So that was for the most part developed, over the last 100 years or so?
Yes, 150 years or so, that's right. Now going back to the human equation, if the climate will change, or if it will vary, whether it's human or nature-induced change, the precipitation patterns will change. The whole precipitation field.
It's already been changed.
It's already changed. So there are two options: either you store more water, or you make the people move where the water is. Oh, well, that's not going to work. Although it worked in biblical times, the Israelite tribes were moving around, and it's a magnificent book that has been published by an Israeli scholar recently that parallels the story of the movement of the Israelite tribes to local climate change. They were after water all the time. But now that option is, of course, less feasible. But you can have water conveyance structure, so more effective use and utilization of the groundwater resources. Groundwater resources, although may also go through some changes, and we don't know, to tell the truth, how much that change is going to be, that as precipitation patterns change, the recharge areas will be different. So therefore, it is very, very important that we try to conserve the quality of the future resource by protecting the recharge areas and by understanding where the recharge areas are.
Well, how do you determine where those areas are, and then as a corollary, what, from your perspective, are governments doing to protect those areas?
Well,
especially on a global basis, because
yes,
it's such an issue.
Well, the recharge area, this is the standard hydrogeology. It's almost hydrogeology 101. I mean, it's a huge task, though. But it's governments, ministries of environment or water resources, as in the developing countries as well, have done a great deal of effort to identify the recharge areas. And in many places there are policies in terms of laws and regulations to protect the recharge areas. In many areas, unfortunately, and that's the situation often in the least developing countries, growth is uncontrolled. Movement is uncontrolled. No things like building permits. The very poor are moving from Favelas, or they're moving wherever job opportunities or living opportunities exist. And in some areas, these recharge areas are being populated, and all the waste that comes out goes down directly to the aquifer, which the next generation will then consume.
I want to focus a little bit on this issue as part of the broader issue. The destruction of what would otherwise be clean water supplies. What are the elements that are involved in that? How serious of an issue is it? And what efforts generally are being made or recommended to change that situation?
It's not so much the humans directly, but the activities that the humans generate, namely agriculture. In that regard, agriculture is not only the biggest user of water. If you look at the total use of water, say 100% you call it, then 70 to 80% of the total use of water is agriculture. Irrigation, farming, animal husbandry.
Are you, in essence, saying that one of the issues here is that if a given country, or whether it's the government of the country or industries in that particular country or some other parts of the populace, want to retain their right to put stuff in the water that's upstream and the water travels to another country or another population downstream, they just want to retain that right, and that's why they're holding back, perhaps, on going with this convention?
Well, in some cases.
Is it an issue?
It is an issue in some cases, because this convention, for instance, the UN Convention, says that the upstream country is not supposed to make changes that would cause damage to the downstream country. Now, of course, as lawyers, the concept of damage is subject to interpretation. But definitely, for instance, if a toxic reservoir the dam of it is breaking up, and it releases toxic sludge, and it causes, as it happened in Central Europe not long ago, causes the killing of the whole fish population in a major river. That is damage.
Yeah.
That is certainly subject to the international law. So this is really the use of the conventions, is to facilitate that the nations that share a basin cooperate in an equitable manner, that there is no loser and there is no upstream control. Ad absurdum, you can build up reservoirs upstream and retain all the water, and then what happens downstream? That's a damage to the downstream country. So that convention basically excludes that this would happen unless they violate international law.
Is water, in your experience and observation, also potentially being used, or actually being used, as a political tool?
Oh, very often, yes. Although there is somehow, and I have to apologize in mentioning it to you, sometimes in the media there are some little bit, well, in the tabloid type of media, that the next war in the Middle East will be for water. While if you look at history, just the opposite happened. Even in case of armed conflicts, they share water. For instance, during the first Intifada, the Israeli water commissioner and the Palestinian water commissioner were, as I was told, in daily telephone contact on sharing the water. Otherwise, they were just shooting at each other like crazy. So that symbolizes how deep water is in the human cycle.
Does it also suggest that water could be used as a tool for enhancing or establishing peaceful relations between countries?
Exactly. If you look, we have a program in UNESCO which is called PCCP, from potential conflict to cooperation potential. Flip the coin and use water as a medium that doesn't divide, but it connects. And if you look at human history, of the many conflicts, wars and military conflicts, very few have been the primary cause for water. And there are very interesting examples. You see, religious texts which are saying that even in case of armed conflicts, you have to give the right to your enemy to have access to water.
Even so.
Yeah. And these are very long things. So if you look at the Oregon State University Geography Department, Professor Aaron Wolf has made an amazing study to look at whether conflict prevails or cooperation over the past 4,000 years. And it's cooperation that prevails. And that's good news.
It's amazing, because I just my personal impression from following what's going on in the news and in the media in the U.S. largely, most people are very nervous about the future. They're worried and kind of depressed about it, that everything's falling apart. My gosh, what are we going to do? And what you're saying, his study shows, is kind of that, hey, it's not really that bad. Yeah. Really, better things are happening.
That's right. But it requires cooperation. So it's this global water crisis, what we are all screaming about, can be avoided only and only if there is cooperation between counties, between countries, between regions, and globally through appropriate legal instruments.
More coming up on Dazzle Unlimited right after this break. Stay tuned.
These hands hold tight. These hands love. These hands support. These hands create. These hands save lives. To empower your hands to help make a difference, call the American Heart Association at 877-242-4277 for a CPR class near you. These hands are wise.
So where are things, would you say, trending now? Here we are speaking today, it's late summer 2008. Say for the next 10 years, what do you see as the future of these kinds of agreements to protect the ability to share and and ensure the safety of water that is shared between countries?
Well, I don't want to paint too rosy of a picture, particularly in the transboundary areas, because still there are upstream countries that are considering their hydrological data as classified data secret. So the downstream country knows that the flood is coming when they are flooded. Now, technology helps here because remote sensing and satellite hydrology will very soon operationally provide data for anybody to have access to the data and to the knowledge which is behind. Very important thing is to have the data collection and analysis capabilities of countries to be improved, particularly in the developing countries. It's a long-term investment. The problem is that you talk about decades, and as some of the cynics are saying, a government expected lifetime, if they are lucky, is 4 years. So it's not a priority, and what we are trying to do, and this is what the Stockholm Water Forum tries to do, is to raise the awareness of the politicians that to invest politically into water and to invest politically into sanitation that are inseparable, it means that they invest to their own people. So that, of course, needs more than politicians. It needs statesmen. Right? You know, your President Kennedy said in the 60s that anybody who solves the water problems of the world should get 2 Nobel Prizes, one in peace and one in science. And that man is yet to come.
Excellent words. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Again, my guest, Dr. Szöllösi-Nagy of the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. I'm Steve Steinberg, the series host, and I'll see you again next week on another Dazzle Unlimited. Good night.